The next thing I wanted to talk about is the MPT, or the Multistate Performance Test. And the MPT is an important part of the bar exam. As I mentioned, most of our students are taking the program so that they can qualify for the bar exam. And so in taking the bar exam, there are essentially three components. There's the MBE, Multi-State Bar Exam, which is multiple choice. And in a UBE jurisdiction, the Uniform Bar Exam jurisdiction, that is going to count for about half of your score. The remainder of your score is going to be essay writing, both the MEE, essay questions like the one I just presented, and the MPT, which is very different. So I want to just give you an idea of what the MPT looks like. This is another thing that we sometimes address in the non-degree program. I often will give students a practice MPT, and we will work through it at the end of the course so that you have some familiarity with it. And I think it's a good review and a good exercise to work with legal writing. In a sense, when we work with those essays, all of those skills that we're talking about in essay writing would apply to the MPT. But the MPT is different than the essays and the MEE. It's different in a number of ways. And in fact, really, this is the part of the bar exam that most closely resembles what you do in practice, and that in many ways is the most difficult to directly study for. They're not testing you on your knowledge of the law in the MPT. Instead, they're testing you on your ability to read the law, read cases and statutes, and apply that to a fact pattern. Or perhaps, depending on the setup, write a memo, talk to a client, present an oral argument, different skills. The purpose or the setup here is different. In the MEE, you have 30 minutes per essay, so they're very quick. You are expected to know the law and apply it to the facts in a very quick way. The MPT is different in that there's only 2 essays on the bar exam, but they're each 90 minutes long. They're 90 minutes because it's more in depth, and you have to read the background material that they give you with the MPT. The MPT always is going to include a file and a library. The file is going to be the information, the facts that you are given from the bar exam. It will be, could be any number of things. It could be a deposition transcript. It could be testimony from court, a client memo, but basically that's the factual basis that you need to work with. You then have a library, and that is going to be short versions of cases, statutes, rules. That's going to be your law that you then need to apply. And so you basically need to take the library and apply it to the file. In doing so, what they're looking for, what the graders are looking for, is your ability to understand what facts are important, what facts are not important. Highlight, what really matters. You're going to need to be able to analyze the statute, the case, the administrative materials, whatever it is, analyze and understand the law that is given to you, apply it to the facts, resolve issues, and of course, communicate effectively in your written work, all within time constraints that make this relatively difficult. The format can be very different depending on the MPT that you are given. The most common is the memorandum or the brief. Most of the time you are asked to write a memo or a brief. So a memorandum would be an objective analysis of a legal issue, of a legal question that is presented. So it would be very much like writing an essay for an exam, a normal essay. A brief is going to be the same thing, except that it's persuasive. You're arguing for your client, and you're taking a side on who should win. The rest of these are more rare, but you should be ready for them, and understand how to draft or how to write these particular things, whether it's an opinion letter, a demand letter, closing arguments. Commercial, this is, I want to make 2 points here. And one is that in our program, I think we're going to do a good job of preparing you to write the memo or the brief, because they're very similar to the writing that we do. You'll get more limited exposure to these other things, which is why it's important, even if, excuse me, even after going through our program, it is important to get additional resources from a commercial bar prep provider, from a bar prep organization. You need to study outside of just this program to be successful on the bar exam, and really work with practice questions, especially in the MPT portion of the bar exam. So in analyzing the substantive issues in the MPT, as I mentioned, a big part of it is writing legal analysis that is very similar to what you would do for a law school essay. In doing so, you need to write in the IRAC format or the CRAC format, and that's something that we'll be working with as we go through the course, and we work with those we work with those practice essays. Some other things that are important to keep in mind here is that you need to get practice with factual analysis, presenting the facts in a way that people can understand, and writing in a clear and consistent way. Let's move on to strategies for taking the MPT now that we have some idea of what it is. So the most important strategy might be time management. You need to have an approach in mind before you sit down for the bar exam. You need to hold yourself to certain time limits. You need to have a structured approach to how you take the test, which means you need to practice, and practice more. My recommendation would be to take about half of your time reading through the material, so that's 45 minutes, reading through the library, reading through the file, and organizing your answer. You want to probably read the file first, consistently, or the library first consistently, depending on what works best for you. But you want to have a uniform approach. Some people prefer doing it one way or the other. When you're practicing MPTs, make sure you are practicing those different formats that I have mentioned, because even though you are probably going to get memorandums or be asked to write a persuasive brief, you might encounter one of those other things that is not as common, so make sure that that is familiar to you. There are a number of things that you want to make sure that you are doing, that you try to keep in mind as you work on the MPT. Just in no particular order here, read and follow the task memo. Make sure you pay close attention to the prompt, because it's very easy to just think, I'm going to write an objective memo, or this is the issue I need to analyze. But if you're not following the instructions, you may not be approaching it in the right way. So make sure you pay a lot of attention to the prompt and the task memo. You want to plan your answer. Don't just start writing the second after you're done reading. Pay attention to the format and the tone. The graders are going to really focus on, are you writing this in the right way? An objective memo is very different than a brief, which is very different than an argument in court, an opening statement or a closing argument. You need to make sure you're using the right tone. Cite to cases. Make sure that you are using the file and the law in the file as much as possible. Don't just rely on your knowledge of the law. That's why the library is there. And in fact, you should use the cases not just to discover the law, but also to do analogical reasoning, to make analogies or distinctions. And that is something that is incredibly important in a common law jurisdiction. And so it's something that we will be working with in the courses, especially in common law courses and constitutional law, because it is a big part of the analysis that they're looking for in the MPT and in practice, honestly. And so that would simply be saying, well, is this hypothetical situation like the case or is it different than the case, and why, right? You would be comparing the facts and how the rules apply to the facts in a very detailed way. Make sure your writing is organized and that your structure, your organizational structure is obvious. You want to use signals, words like under the majority approach, or topic sentences. Frame it in a way that makes sense. Again, timing, right? That's number one. And it's well, I mentioned in the prior slide and I'm mentioning it now. Make sure that you are covering everything that you need to get to, which means that you have to have your timing down. It's a closed universe. Only rely on the file. Do not bring in your outside knowledge of the law. And, probably the most important tip here is to relax. If you've gone through, you've gotten your law degree in Korea, you've gone through our program, you've studied for the bar exam, you should be able to do well on this because it does not require you to memorize anything outside of what you're reading in the exam itself. So again, this is going through some strategy, but I know that I'm taking a long time here, so I'm going to go through this quickly. What we usually tell people to do, I know I mentioned people have different approaches here, but what we really tell people to do is usually read the instructions first, read the task memo, make sure you have the right format, then go to the library, develop a working outline, and then plug the facts from the file into that outline. Spend at least 45 minutes of your time writing, and if you have any time left over, make sure you are proofreading and checking for big errors. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it should look like a polished product to the extent possible. There are different plans of attack, alternative plans of attack you could follow here, but the last thing I'll talk about is grading. When the MPT is graded, the graders are looking at a point sheet. They have certain things in mind that they are really looking for, and it's going to be more comprehensive than what you could possibly do on your own. So especially when you are looking at the point sheet from the practice exams, don't be discouraged if yours is not perfect. It won't be. But it should look somewhat similar in tone, structure, and approach. And you should have most of the analysis, even though, of course, you're not going to have everything. We have, I personally have a huge number of released MPTs and point sheets. It's important to go through these. And I think just by doing practice, you can get a good sense of what the graders are looking for. Right? I know you probably can't read this, but this is an example of what a point sheet would look like, and gives you an idea, if you can sort of squint and pick up the text there, of what the graders are actually looking for. Okay, so with that, thank you for sticking with me through all of that. I'd like to turn things over to Dean Ioannidis to talk about the online LLM program in more detail.